in creating security, your piece security, which I have to say is probably the trickiest piece I've had on this project so far.
Sorry.
But I really like it. It's such a powerful piece. And I like the challenge. And Maria too. We both talked about how nice it is to challenge our chops and get something meaty like this. But I was curious about how you got from the original ask for this project and how you came to this point.
The piece deals with the detention and separation of families along the border, beginning in the previous administration and continuing through today.
Right, it's very bad right now. I mean, we don't hear about it very much, actually.
And that's kind of the point of the piece, which is that this is such our reactions to it are so visceral, and it's such a horrifying thing that's happening. And it's essentially they're separating children from their families. It's genocide. It's such a horrible thing that like maintaining our focus on it is like looking into the sun, and we become almost, I don't even say numb, but like we have like almost amnesia about it, that it comes into our focus and then it leaves our focus, and we don't think, and I don't want to say we, like, I know there are people who are working really hard on this, but I think the kind of attenuation to this, and is I think very common. We look in the news, we don't see things for months about it. It just goes by, and it's something that I personally find horrifying and unacceptable, and it often feels pretty helpless, like there's nothing that we can actually do about it. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is to donate, to get money to places like Raíces or the ACLU, or places that are actually trying to make a difference, to reunite the families, to provide legal representation for the families. And so, one of my goals with this piece is to hopefully spark people to do similar things, to take whatever role they can in trying to help, trying to solve this problem, trying to end the detentions, to reunite the families, to stop the genocide, essentially.
Mm-hmm. We as a society tend to see a problem and we focus on it, but we quickly lose focus on that problem, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it is because it is so hard to hear all the time. Like it's painful to address, and it's hard to figure out what can we do about it. And I think your piece kind of reflects that, right? Like we need to listen, even if it's hard to hear.
Yeah. So you're, what you're getting at has to, the actual piece itself is very harsh. It's very hard to listen to. It's extremely loud on purpose. The piece is meant to be, I don't want to say painful, but it's meant to be aggressive and visceral, and it's meant to, you want to cover your ears because it's so loud and it's so intense. And the idea is that yes, that intensity fluctuates over the course of the piece, but it always keeps coming back. And I feel it's important to stay there and to kind of I think I used the term before, to look into the sun, right? To bear witness to I mean, the piece is not, we're not bearing witness to the piece, but, like in terms of what's actually happening at the border, to bear witness to this, and to, take whatever steps that we can, and to not let it fall out of our consciousness, and to do something, which is for me, one reason that I'm donating the proceeds from this piece to Raíces and the ACLU, and why I encourage anyone who's listening to this piece to make whatever donation they can to those organizations to try to do something about this.
How did you choose the specific percussion instruments that you chose for this piece?
Okay, sure. Well, one of the things I want to do with this piece, I I just wanted the percussion setup to be small. I wanted it to be manageable. I wanted this to be something that's like, a person at a table basically, and then I didn't want this to be like one of these, those giant setups are great, but I wanted this to be a piece that could be kind of portable. But then, the idea of having them all be metal instruments was, I think, there's two parts to that. Number one is I wanted the sound to be as harsh and as aggressive as possible. And so for me that, metal was the answer, these like, a cookie sheet or a tin or pipes, all of these things are very grating sounds. But the other thing is that, once I had that idea, the image of the prison camps kept coming into my mind, and of the cages, the fences, and the kids with those metal blankets on. It's just metal everywhere, and it just, I don't know, for some reason, just it evoked that image, and it just seemed like that's what it had to be, at that point.
But so when you first mentioned you wanted this piece to be very loud, and you asked, is that okay? In terms of my ears and Maria's ears. Yeah. And so I was prepared for something extremely harsh and loud, but actually I was really surprised at how there are wonderful sections that are like almost like childlike, playful sections, and kind of dancey, lyrical, to juxtapose. And I appreciated those. And I like the way you crafted it, like the interesting rhythms and the jauntiness of that one section is kind of jaunty. And yeah, I really enjoyed, like Maria and I were kind of getting into it. Oh, that's great. The tricky thing was that we have so much stuff in parallel, right? So we have to learn how to feel the rhythms together and all that. But they are really beautifully crafted. Oh, thank you. I really appreciated that.
I think the tricky thing for me, with this piece was, I'm going to try to write a piece that is going to be hard to listen to. It's going to be painful. Now, I don't want to say painful, but that, that the sounds are going to be very loud. It's going to be very harsh. It's going to be a hard piece to actually listen to all the way through. And I wanted to make it something that would be rewarding if you did listen to it. I wanted it also to sound like me. If I wrote a piece that was just off-putting and was just, pure pain and pure horror, and people didn't want to listen to it, I think the piece would just die after a performance. And I want, my hope is that this piece, that message comes through, but still there's something rewarding about it, both for the performers and for the listeners. It's still music. I'm not entitled to people's ears. Hopefully, people want to hear the piece. Hopefully there's something in it that's going to, draw them to it musically.
Yeah. In terms of on a video platform, it's hard to see how much of that harshness is going to come across, because the sound always gets compressed, right?
Totally.
So having that contrast between some of those really soft sections probably would amplify.
People can just lower their volume also, it's
that's true. So, that's true.
I'm hoping that people, grit their teeth and give it and give it a listen at full volume to, experience that I don't know, that element.
So when you said, I want some of it to sound like me, what did you mean by that?
Well, I don't want to think of myself as a composer who only does one thing, but I do feel like I know what my music sounds like. I know what the rhythms in my head are like. I know what, when I sit down to write, I know what comes out of me. And, I try to be critical of that. I try to, not only regurgitate, I try not to just regurgitate the same types of sounds all the time. I want to, but I do feel like, there are sounds here, there are rhythms in here that feel natural to me, feel genuine to me, feel like the music in my head. And I don't like to write music that doesn't feel like it has that element in there. You know, I've written things that are very, I tend to like rhythm, you know, like syncopations, you know, odd meters and things like that. But, you know, I've also write slow and pretty music sometimes, but you know, even that slow and pretty stuff, I want it to feel like me. I want all, you know, all the stuff that comes out to be recognizable, you know, to me at least, recognizably me, and hopefully the people who have heard my music and, you know, who know it and, you know, hopefully like it, you know, it's I feel like it would be very, when I started writing this piece, it was very tempting for me to kind of just go with the concept and leave myself out of it, you know. I don't know if that makes sense. And then I had to kind of reassess and be like, no, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel natural. What's wrong with it? Why doesn't it feel right? It's like, oh, because you're not putting anything yourself in there, you know.
And you're a saxophonist.
Yes, that's my what I've done the most study on. I play guitar and piano and banjo.
And you have a band, right? Or you did, or you do?
No, I still do. New album comes out May 7th, actually.
Oh, awesome.
Well, I guess when this interview comes out, it's probably going to be after that. So the album's probably just came out or something like that. But yeah.
If I just have come out, yeah. And so tell me a little bit about that album.
So yeah, my band is called Paper Mice. We've been a band for over a decade now. We've been working on this album for a long time, for like 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, well, you know, we've had it's been a tumultuous 8 years for us. We've had, you know, births and deaths and, you know, not in that, I mean, you know, two of us had kids, you know, two of us lost our fathers during the course of the piece. I lost my as well. Like, you know, a lot of things happened while we were trying to do this. Our bass player moved away. We had to get a new bass player and you know, start playing with him and you know, figure out how we write music together. So, you know, it wasn't like eight years of us twiddling our thumbs. It was us trying to write and then just things happening. And then the pandemic happened when we were about it. You know, I was actually in the studio on March 11th when I was like, oh crap, like, you know, I'm not sending my kid to school tomorrow, you know, and it was just like everything that's been thrown in at us, just seems to be just like trying to stop this album from coming out. So it's been a process to try to get this thing finally released. But like, I have the actual vinyl in my house, like it's done. It's, you know, we've released, you know, 3 of the songs so far, and it's the album will be coming out for real on May 7th. So it's finally happening.
In that album, do you each of you compose? Is it a collective kind of creating the pieces?
Yeah, we write together. Yeah.
Or many of voices in one piece, I guess.
Yeah, like we all work on each song together.
So
it's that's just always how it's been with the group. I feel like it's you know, it can be time consuming, but you know, ultimately you come up with something that everybody feels they have a hand in. And I think that's really, you know, not only is that important, but it's also, I feel like, important to like you know, we tend to not agree on everything, you know, in terms of the direction of the songs, and we have to figure out a way to find a solution that makes everybody happy. And I find that often takes us to a place we never would have gotten to before, and you know, we find solutions that kind of push us beyond our comfort zone, which I think is really valuable.
So this is a question I've been exploring a little bit. Where's the line between classical music and, I mean, would you say the music that your band plays would be classical or not?
No, it's
so how do you find, as a composer, do you think about that line? Like when I asked you to compose for In Tandem, is it because I'm a classical musician? Do you think this is going to be classical genre, or do you even think about that at all?
I used to think about this when I wrote different music. You know, when my composing was, I think, more classical, and then in around, I think, 2013, I realized that I was writing music I didn't feel as connected to as I could, and I started writing music that was more in line with, for instance, the music I was writing in my band. I realized that when I set out all my priorities, my musical priorities, I wasn't writing, you know, I was writing them with my band, but I wasn't writing them on my own. And so I don't consider what I do classical music. You know, it's concert music. I write for, you know, I write it on paper and I give it to performers to play it. But, and, you know, classical music is no doubt an influence in the way that I think about music and, you know, many aspects of my music, but I don't consider it to be classical anymore. And I haven't for a while. You know, I don't necessarily put too much importance on that distinction, but I don't feel like I'm writing classical music, you know. Mm-hmm. I don't know, do you like me less?
No, not at all. What I fear, I think that actually the classical music audience, a lot of the classical music audience is a little bit narrow viewed in terms of what classical music is. And I think that line needs to be kind of erased a little bit mm-hmm. to be more accepting of more types of music. Mm-hmm. Because I could imagine performing your piece on a classical music program. Mm-hmm. And one person had said, it's really the audience that comes. If you have a classical music audience, they would view that as classical music. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it was in a different setting, maybe somebody would say, oh, well, that's jazz, or you know, wherever the venue or the audience would be. But
no, I think, you know, the distinctions between genres and where those boundaries get drawn is a really fraught and complicated issue. And it's one that used to trouble me a lot, and one that, at least with regard to my own work, I just stopped thinking about. And I just said, and while I was considering what I was doing classical music, or let me rephrase this, while I was trying to change the way I wrote and kind of write stuff that made me happy, that was a big concern, is how was this going to be received by the classical music world. And then for me, I just stopped worrying about that and started saying, like, I don't know, I feel like I need to give the audience credit that they're not necessarily there trying to make those distinctions. They're trying to say, am I enjoying the music that I'm hearing? Mm-hmm. We can call it later, and also part of this is, like, who am I writing for? If I'm writing for, quote, the classical audience or whatever, then I'm imagining their set of, what I assume are their sets of tastes and values. And I don't think that's good for me. I think it's better for me to try to think of, like, well, what are the values that I think are important? What are the musical values that I ascribe to? And let me just write those, and hopefully people will connect with them.
There's so many schools right now who are reevaluating how they teach theory or what they offer students in terms of not just centering on the European style of classical music, mm-hmm. And learning more about the harmonies and melodic rhythms of other cultures. And mm-hmm. I was curious to know what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, this is something I think a lot about, actually. I teach music theory at DePaul currently, and I've been really, I've always, since I've been teaching music theory for, oh my goodness, probably 15 years now, and I've always been very adamant about presenting not just one style of music, not just classical music. We discuss these concepts in that set, in theory classes, that, I feel like it's really important that that students hear these concepts, hear it in the music that they care about, that they're familiar with, that they listen to. And depending on what school you're at, you're going to find more or less students that are really focused on classical music. A lot of students are, when I was teaching at Columbia College, a lot of students were really into pop and rock music. I find a lot of my students at DePaul have a wide variety of interests, and I think that the music that we teach them and the way that we approach that should be reflective of those students' interests, and should be more reflective of the music, the world of music, as a whole. So there's, I said, you know, the majority of the music that I teach is not classical music. I teach the same concepts that, you know, we talk about the secondary dominant chords and modal mixture, but, you know, I try to bring in a wide variety of musical sources to get that, because I think, yeah, I feel like I think people connect more with what they're learning when they see themselves reflected in it, you know.
What projects do you have coming up besides the album coming out, or will have come out?
So I just finished a huge piece for Wendy Richmond, the violist and singer, a piece. So it's a piece for a singing violist. So and all of the text in the piece are stories that my son wrote, and he just turned 6. He was, I think, 4 when he started writing when he wrote all the stories. But he just turned 6 last week. And so it's about a half-hour long cycle of songs called the Storybook. And then I'm about to finish the last movement, well, actually the second movement, but the last one I'm writing, for about 35-minute song cycle for the Quince Ensemble for 4 voices, called In Dreams, which is all, every movement, there's 5 movements, and every movement is a different person describing a dream that they had. And so, you know, some of them are really funny, some of them are really scary, some of them are really beautiful. But it's a piece I've been working on since, I think, 2015, 2016. And I've been writing it one movement at a time, and finally I'm very, very close to finishing this final movement. And so I'm expecting both of those to be premiered in the fall. And then, you know, that's what I'm working on now, and then some other stuff coming up, but I don't want to talk about that stuff yet.
Yeah, you reminded me, because the way security has morphed, in the very beginning, before you put any pen to paper, we had talked about using voice, or me and Maria having to use voice while playing, right? And
I'm writing a lot of pieces for singing performers, and we had talked about that as a potential for this piece,
which was a little frightening for me. But we had talked about how uncomfortable that would be, and in a way that uncomfortableness would have fed into the fact that we have to look at uncomfortable issues, right? Have uncomfortable conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, I decided against it because I felt like, you know, finding a text that I felt like would work for this piece, I think was difficult. And writing one myself, I felt like not qualified for so many reasons to be actually writing text for this piece, you know. So ultimately this, you know, the sound that the idea of the piece and the sound that went in my head ultimately kind of coalesced around an instrumental piece, which, you know, I haven't been writing much straight instrumental work in a while, so it was kind of nice. It was fun.
Yeah, because we had talked about, you had mentioned uncomfortable finding a text, and when all the last summer, when the George Floyd incidents happened, and so many other Black lives that were lost, their names were in the news over and over again, right? And we talked about the fact that, but there are many people that are nameless that are suffering or have suffered. And I think that's how we made the shift. We had talked about the shift towards all those kids. At that point, there was also a news item about those 500 kids with no family, and or they had families, but they were not connected with them. But those kids were all nameless, right?
I mean, we don't know their names. Yeah.
Right. We don't know their names because their names don't come up over and over again in the news. But so I thought I loved how your thinking kind of progressed through this project.
Fed someone to. It just, for me, it feels like it's such a, you know, for me, it's such a messy process that, like, you know, you seeing me kind of like trudge my way through all of these different, you know, potential ideas and getting excited about them and then throwing them away. And, you know, it's just, it's such a, it's just such a messy process that it's a, I'm glad you felt that you got something out of it.
Well, I think it's important for people to know that it can be a messy process to get to the first idea, and that ideas are thrown away, and it's okay, because you almost have to kind of go through those evolutions in order to get to the end product. And not be afraid.
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, that's how the process works. I know there are people who seem to kind of, they get the idea and then they can just seamlessly, execute that, and that's just never been me. It's just always been I always have to kind of get my hands dirty, both in terms of conceptualizing a piece and in terms of the actual musical material. And I feel like I have to really get to know the material and feel at home in it before I know what it is, and so that's the case with the conceptual underpinnings of the piece, and that's the case with the actual musical content, which is just like, it takes me a long time because I need that period of kind of getting to know you, getting to know you, but I mean, getting to know the material and getting to know, like, what does that play musically and what does it play conceptually,
And you worked with Maria separately, even, to ask her questions and hear sounds of instruments that she had. She showed me this beautiful tin that she had. I said, "What is that instrument?" And she showed me, she said, "This is a Japanese tea tin that I had in my studio."
Our bass voice. Yeah, totally. That's the low end in the metal setup. Yeah. But she was extremely generous with her time and really patient and with me. And we kind of worked together to find a setup that, gave me exactly what I wanted, but also was manageable for her and was, wasn't too unwieldy, so it was a real privilege to get to spend that time with her. Yeah,
I appreciate the compactness of the setup, because first of all, it's hard to record because we're all spread out already, but also my hope is that some of these pieces can go to some schools, and it'll be much easier to transport a set of instruments that could actually fit on a table than have to bring marimba and chimes.
I mean, that's part of the idea. I definitely wanted this to be portable, but also I also really like the idea of just like a small thing creating a lot of noise, or like the piece I'm writing, that viola piece I mentioned to you, like writing for a singing performer, to have like one person with one instrument doing like a whole band's worth of music. Like I like the idea of small forces creating like large stuff. That's like my band. We have only 3 people in it: guitar, bass, drums, and singing. And it's I like. I don't use a lot of effects and I don't use any effects on the guitar except for I have like one pedal. I like the idea of just taking something very basic, very simple, and doing a lot of things with it. I think so. I think the choice of that setup was definitely, there's a lot of reasons behind it. I think, I fit really nicely with a lot of different conceptual angles.
Well, this has been amazing to talk with you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for including me in this project. It's been really great, really fun.
Oh, thank you for your peace security.
And I've loved working with you and Maria. And I'm excited to keep working with you on this. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.